Today I'm going to be talking about DRUID infoboxes. DRUID standing for Data Representation Ultra Infobox Design, but pretty much being the word DRUID. This is a Lua module plus CSS and JavaScript associated files. So it's a little package that you can install on your wiki as an alternative to the portable infobox extension or some other infobox framework that you may be using on your wiki. And the goal is to make it easy for wiki administrators who aren't necessarily developers to write their own infobox templates in a relatively straightforward way with a lot of functionality built in, and also in a way that it's very extensible for admins who do know how to code and do feel comfortable editing code. So this is something that's built for primarily wiki farms that have wiki editing open to the public, such as WikiGG or Mirahese or any other wiki farm where you have a bunch of admins who don't have a lot of development experience writing their own code, wanting to design things, wanting to customize them, wanting to give users very unique experiences that are tailored to the information for their specific topic wiki. So you can see an example of a DRUID infobox here. This is an imaginary info box for an imaginary video game where you have creatures in the game. One of them is a dragon, and this is the example I'll be using throughout this entire talk, is this very beautiful image of a dragon that is absolutely not even close to an image of a flower, and I don't know why anyone would possibly think that. So expect to see lots of this gorgeous picture of a dragon. But you can tell from the code here that there isn't there aren't that many symbols. This is the infobox definition. You might be used to seeing infobox definitions that are, 50 to 100 lines of code, and most of them are if statements that are wrapping table rows to conditionally display them. And you have a bunch of pipe characters that are escaped with the exclamation point magic word, and infobox templates can be pretty complicated, but this one is mostly English words. So the root of the infobox is the sections parameter, and then you can index into each of the sections by providing a list of data fields that go inside of the sections. So we have a general info section, a stats section, and a special section. And then general info is going to have the fields region and element, and stats is going to have attack, HP, armor, and attack speed. And then we have this special format for attack speed where if the attack speed is specified by the user on the page dragon where we're calling this infobox template, then we're going to add a percent sign after that. And you'll notice that this is all happening inside of a Lua invoke. So the attack speed here is going to be the frame.args attack speed, and the attack speed sent by the user will be the frame get parent.args.attack speed. So I'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit later. So we also have a collapsible section here. So the special section has collapsible and collapsed assigned to it. So on the left side of the info box, we have the default view with the plus sign, and then on the right side, we have the expanded view if the user clicks special. So how is this set up? I'll talk about the code a little bit in a little bit, but if you wanted to add this to your own wiki, there's a couple dependencies. Extension variables and extension open graph meta are both used in the Lua module to provide a couple pieces of functionality that aren't necessarily required. It's not actually required for every info box to have an ID, and if you do have an ID on the info box, you want it to be unique. So what I've done is I've used the variables extension to have a global index that increments, and then each info box is indexed by that global ID. And I also have one line of code that sets the main image if you have Open Graph Meta installed. If you don't want to use Open Graph Meta, you can delete that too. I do recommend having page forms installed for the parser function array map, and I also forked parser power and put array map and array map template into that So if you want to not have all of page forms, but you want array map or array map template, you can use that too. And you'll be a little bit sad without parser functions. Again, if we look over here, there are times that you want to use if because you want to add additional formatting to whatever the user is specifying. So, I mean, you're going to be sad on any wiki without parser functions. The installation, you can copy paste the code from these pages. Documentation is on the WikiGG support wiki, and you can import the CSS and JavaScript either into gadgets or into your common CSS and JS. So why did I do this? Uh, info boxes are really complicated. So like I said, generally when you look at an info box, you're looking at like dozens and dozens of lines of code to do very little, but when I say very little, I mean doing a lot of complicated stuff with what should hopefully be just a little bit of data. Because when we specify an info box, we have a table, we have some rows, we have some field values, but we have to make all of it conditional. If there's no value for health points, then we don't want to display the health points row. If there's no value for any of the statistics, we don't want to display the statistics section. And this gets into a lot of needing to have nested if statements. And because we're inside of a table when we do this, we need to either be escaping all of our table syntax or we need to use actual HTML tables. These are not things that wiki editors who are relatively new to being wiki editors necessarily want to deal with. There's also the need to format user-provided content so that you can put raw values into Cargo or Semantic MediaWiki, assuming that you're using one of those extensions. And info boxes are very high visibility. When you look at a wiki page, what's the first thing you see? You see the info box, which means that wiki admins are going to have strict requirements about how they want their info box to look, the user experience that they want to be providing to their users, um, the design should be tailored to the subject of the wiki. And all of these things are things that brand new wiki admins need to be doing because the info box is one of the first things that you set up when you're setting up a new wiki. So we want info boxes to be easy to define so that admins are able to get started creating info boxes, creating pages that have info boxes very early on in the process of making their wiki. But then we also want the info boxes to be easy to edit by the average editor who's not necessarily an admin. And then we need them to be easy to read for users who come to the site. So there's kind of four groups of people. One of them is the author of the info box framework. So in this case, me. One of them is the wiki admins who are setting up the wiki. And they'll be creating the info box template at template info box creature, template item info box, or however you want to name it. One of the groups of people are editors who then use that template, and then the last group of people are visitors who aren't editing the wiki at all. And you want to put as much of the complexity onto the shoulders of the Infobox framework author so that it's possible for admins to easily define info boxes that are easy to use by the other two groups. So one attempt to do this is the portable info boxes extension, and you can see here a definition of a very small info box. There's kind of a lot of code here. We can hopefully do better than this. So portable info boxes have a couple pros. One of them is that it comes with the Infobox Builder visual editor. It's not VE, but it's a visual editor for creating info boxes. And that would be great if it actually had full support of everything that PI does. But Infobox Builder support is a little bit limited. As soon as you want to do anything that's remotely complicated, you have to interact directly with the XML. Conditional display for sections is handled for you. So if you want to display stats only if anything in stats is actually showing up, that will be handled for you. You don't need to be writing if statements. Like there's no if statements here. It's just XML. But when I say it's just XML, I mean XML is still pretty complicated for the average wiki admin who hasn't written code before. They're very verbose. It's not easily extensible because it's an entire extension, and if you want to edit it, you're going to be editing PHP and making a PR to some repo and then hoping that it gets merged, as opposed to just having a Lua module that you can do anything that you want because you own the Lua code that's on your wiki. One other pro of it is that it does compile to better semantic HTML than we can do without extending the list of HTML elements that MediaWiki supports, but I still don't like PIs. So what we really want instead is that we want some syntax that's not XML. We want something that feels like normal wiki text editing. You're using template syntax, you're using parameters, you're using things that are going to be consistent with the other kind of template editing that you need to do on your wiki. And we want it to be based in Lua so that anyone can extend it with a cursory knowledge of Lua. If they want to change a couple small things, they can change it. If they want to change a big thing, they can hopefully get help to change it. And that said, we don't want these to be Lua-based info boxes. We want this to be a Lua framework for creating wiki text info boxes. So the admins who are creating info boxes, assuming that they don't need to add any functionality that's not currently provided, they should be able to do everything in wiki text without requiring any Lua knowledge at all. And that was a really funny pun. So you might say that this is just another standard because a lot of wikis already have something like this, and we could just use PIs. Yeah, it's kind of just another standard, but I think it's a good one, so I made it. So why and how did I make Druid? On Leakpedia, I had something that worked a little bit like this. They were entirely Lua-based infobox definitions, but you can see here that I have most of an infobox specified in something that looks a lot like JSON data. It's not necessarily how I would format it if I were to redo this. Having the sections and the contents be separate objects like this. Looking back, I don't love it. I was considering editing it to how I would actually do it were I to re-implement this today and just showing you something that is not how I actually did it, but I decided to show you what is actually live on Linkpedia, and this is how I did it at the time. So we want to take this structured data that we can easily define in Lua, and then we want to turn it into something that we can flatten into wiki text. So here's how a champion info box looks, and when the user actually uses it, and we want to make this happen, but put this data into wiki text instead of Lua. And here's another template that also actually exists on Linkpedia, and this is the data to show header tabs on the tops of pages. So this is a visual element that will be at the top of every single page that is linked to from it. So it looks like a static visual element that is above all of the wiki text, and it focuses the tabs for whatever pages you're looking at right now. So we have the events at the top, and the events is how you index into the entire tree of data. And then the events here is going to be analogous to our sections list in the info box later on. And then we have these slashes for subpages. And so we have the data for split one, and then we have the data for split one / picks and bans. And that sort of looks like flattening out the entire path that you would need in order to pull data from a JSON. So if you imagine that that slash is a dot instead, this looks somewhat like structured data that we could be getting from a JSON that represents these tabs. But it's done entirely in a wiki text template, and we want to define something like this for our info boxes. So here's a minimal example. This is not any kind of implementation of the Infobox framework, but this is kind of our wish list for what we really, really want wiki admins to be able to define, and then how we want wiki editors to be able to use that definition afterwards. So at the top, we have this Infobox creature template, and really what we want to say is that there's two sections, general info and stats. In the general info section, there's a region and an element. In the stats section, there's attack, HP, and armor. And then we have an image at the top. And that's pretty much everything that is written on this page. And that is how you would actually define it. You might want to wrap the file inside of an if statement so that if there's no image, you either instead show some default image or maybe you don't show an image at all. So maybe you want to add an if statement there or something. And again, maybe you want to be formatting something where like the attack is like uh, plus 50 instead of 50. So there might be a little bit more formatting, but more or less, this is a reasonable info box that could be deployed in production somewhere. And the question is, can we make this happen with some info box framework? Can we give this user experience to wiki admins and wiki editors? And if you just want to compare to portable info boxes really quickly to see the disparity in how terse our version is and our wish list version, there's a lot more code here. And I only put a single section here because if I had tried to do two sections, it wouldn't fit vertically on my slide. And like I said, we want to support custom formatting here so that we can write this percentage after attack speed. So the question is, can we do that? How can we deal with this custom formatting for some parameters but not others? You'll notice if we look back over here, there's actually nothing that is looking for the argument attack or HP or armor in the invoke statement. That's only being defined in the info box on the Dragon page. So how are we going to merge all of these arguments together where you can have attack defined on the page Dragon, but not in the template infobox creature, and you also have the ability to reformat attack speed to add the percentage sign in the info box? And the answer is frame.args takes precedence over frame getParent.args. And I mentioned this at the start of the talk. This is really the magic of this framework, is right here on this slide. And typically in Lua, if you send arguments to your invoke statement directly into the invoke, you're going to want those to be default args. And so usually you do this the other way where frame get parent args are more important than frame args. Well, not necessarily more important, but they take precedence over. And we're going to do it the opposite way in this case. We're going to say that the arguments passed from the invoke are going to take precedence over the parent args. So the frame args are or they're both frame args, but the child frame args are the arguments that are sent in the invoke statement. And Lua also knows about every single argument that is sent to the content page, transcluding the template that contains the invoke. So that's a mouthful, but the frame getParent.args are args that are written on the page Dragon and sent to the template infobox creature. And then the frame args are the args that are inside of infobox creatures sent to the invoke. So you can see there's arguments inside of the invoke at template infobox creature. Then there's args inside of infobox creature on the Dragon page. Those are going to be merged together with the invoke ones overwriting the content page ones. So that's really the magic that we have here is that we merge these together, we overwrite with the formatted version, and then we get the best of every single world, and it's fantastic. So here is most of a minimal implementation of info boxes. We create an info box, we make sections. We will always create a section for every section parameter that the user requested in the sections argument, but we're only going to attach that node containing that section if we printed one or more arguments. So you can see at the end of the function on the right side, if not should print, then return nil end. So we, in that case, attach a node of nil, which doesn't do anything using the mw.html library, which is super awesome and I love it. So we are able to relatively easily, debatably relatively easily, depending on how you feel about the code you're looking at right now, we're able to show sections conditionally only if we actually had content in one of them, and otherwise we show nothing. And just a note on the conventions that I use to name these functions, when I say make, that means I'm going to create an HTML node using mw.html, and then I'm going to return it. If I say print, that means that the first argument to that parameter is going to be a an existing mw.html node, and then I'm going to append something to it, either content, some classes, attributes, etc. So print means print to the existing node, which is passed as the first parameter in this function, and make means create a new node and then return it. And I really like this convention and encourage you to do something similar to it or exactly it if you're working with mw.html a lot. So in addition to that minimal implementation of info boxes, there's also some stuff here for PI compatibility. So PIs support this column layout where you basically use CSS grid and show stuff in boxes next to each other instead of showing things in lines with one table row per item. So here is the Lua code that I have to do this. All of the Lua code that I'm showing here is condensed a little bit. It's not exactly the code that is in the actual infobox module. I've left out a few classes that are added to every element as constants to make all of the code fit on a single slide in a hopefully readable font. But this is most of the code to make a grid section. And the interesting part is the third to last line of Lua, where we make sure that the final cell in the grid is taking up the entire remaining space in the row. So here you see we have 3 columns, and then that's defined using items underscore columns equals 3. So if you say a number of columns that you want in any section name, it'll apply this grid layout to that section. And by using some inline CSS and modular arithmetic, we make it take up the entire row. And on the lower left-hand side, you can see that we're going to make a grid section if you have defined a number of columns. Otherwise, we'll make a regular section. Featured image galleries are another thing that PIs support. In PI, there is some code that works with the gallery extension tag and sets up effectively a tabber for you here. I did not want to do that, so I explicitly added support for it where you can send a list of images and a list of image underscore labels. And those param names, images and image labels, are exactly what Druid is looking for. So that's what you want to define a template infobox creature. And if we do some cleverness with array map and explode, we can allow the user at the page shape changing creature to define this gallery-like syntax where you have the file name and then a colon and then its caption, where the caption is or I guess it's label, sorry. The file name and then its label, and then the labels are in this Flexbox design at the top of the page. And then you can click one to focus that image. And you don't have to do it this way. You could just have the user provide a list of images and a list of image labels, and the nth image label corresponds to the nth image. But I like doing it this way. I think it's a cleaner syntax. I didn't want to hard code all of these splits into Druid, so I went for this compromise solution where you can sort of pick and choose exactly how you want to display it, although it does require this little bit of array map code that you can copy, and it's okay if you don't totally understand it. And then in the JavaScript, I have this Druid toggleable class, which is a somewhat generic toggleable class where you can actually toggle any information that you want in the entire info box. So if in the bear form, it has 50 attack, and in the dragon form, it has 85 attack, then you can toggle between those two values depending on which one you're showing. So it's PI functionality, and then it's extended a little bit to have nicer UX. You can also adjust the display and labels a little bit. You can hide them all together by using the underscore no label modifier, and then you can also, if you give a display value like this, we can make them all be item with the underscore item, or sorry, the underscore label after any section name. So if you want to have multiple fields that have the same label, you can do that. There's a couple of fun extras that I will also briefly mention. If you want to style your info boxes differently from each other, then you can set the kind parameter, and then that'll give a class that's unique to that kind of info box, and then you can style them differently. If you want your fire monsters and water monsters to be styled differently, and they have two different info box templates, you can change the kind that way. And you could also change the kind to be dependent on user input. If you wanted to say the kind is going to be equal to the element argument, you could do that. There's a lot of built-in selectors. Again, like I said, I didn't show all of the classes that I'm adding to all of the elements in the code that I showed you in previous slides, but pretty much the title of the info box, the image of the info box, and all of the images if you want to have a toggleable gallery. Each row, each label on the left-hand side, and cell value on the right-hand side, each of those has its own class. It's easy to style. The provided CSS is all CSS variables based. If you're working on a wiki, GGWiki, they are defaulted to our conventions for colors on the entire wiki. If you're not, then you can put your own hex values directly into the CSS variables provided instead of basing it on parent CSS variables. And each label will also generate a unique selector. So if you want to have DRUID value description to be italicized, then the description field will always be italicized. So italicizing flavor text like a description is one use case for it. Another one would be to highlight the most important information in the info box. If you want certain things to be a certain color or something, you can always index into that using the field specific selector. You can also change the delimiter if you don't like comma. I'm defaulting to comma for everything, but if you'd rather use semicolon, if you'd rather use multiple commas, it can be a multi-character long separator if you want. Like I said at the start of the talk, you can use the assuming that you have Open Graph Meta installed, it will apply set main image to your main image. So if you have multiple images on the page, every now and then, by default, it will give you the wrong image as the featured image for embeds. So set main image is called. And each info box on the page gets a unique ID, so you can link to info boxes to jump to them on the page, assuming that you have the variables extension installed and you keep that code around. So at the end, I wanted to show you the art gallery for the shape-changing creature because the single most important part about DRUID is that all of the examples come with very gorgeous MS Paint drawings. So you can admire the beautiful artwork associated with DRUID. So hopefully you have enjoyed this, and if you want to use DRUID, use DRUID. If you don't, then write your own framework taking inspiration from this. I really like the idea of making things as easy as possible for wiki admins who don't have a lot of coding experience because MediaWiki is very intimidating and there's a lot of stuff that people want to be able to do and sort of expect that they will be able to do. And if they can't do it, then the software just feels so frustrating. And info boxes are a very big one for people wanting to set them up and wanting to customize them and wanting to see their vision for the wiki realized through that configuration. And last year, my talk was about how I don't love info boxes, but info boxes are here to stay and everyone wants to use them. So let's make info boxes easy to use and easy to define and give everyone a great editing experience when they're new to MediaWiki. If you want to see more stuff that I've done, I have a blog at river.me. It has a bunch of MediaWiki tutorials. A lot of it is aimed towards people who have a little bit of experience with MediaWiki, but not a lot. Some of it is aimed towards people who have a lot of MediaWiki experience. There's, I think it's like 11 pages of content now or something, or like 11 pages in the list of articles. I've written a bunch over the years. So check that out if you enjoyed this and you want to see other stuff I've done.
Did she say that source code is on river.me?
Is the source code on?
No, the source code is on the WikiGG support wiki. So the best place, I'm gonna paste into the EMWCon element chat. So this is the best place to refer to as like the main documentation page. And then there's 3 pages of code because there's like Lua, CSS, and JavaScript, but that's the main Lua page is that module. But the best page that links to all 3 pages is the first page that I linked to, the DRUID infoboxes page.
And then if there's anybody who wants that that's not on the element chat, we can copy it over to the Signal chat. If anybody who's not on both of them wants it, just let us know.
Yeah, and it's also linked from one of the early pages in my presentation slide, which should be linked to from the conference page. So you can also get it from there.
Awesome. Thank you. Any other questions? Brian?
First of all, really nice work on the art.
Thanks. I know that you specifically did not like my art originally, so I'm glad that you changed your mind about that.
I thought that the flower was beautiful, but never realized how stable is the code pulled from? I mean, is there any things that would be kind of considered breaking changes that if I implemented, you release a feature later that would cause me to have to kind of overwrite what I did?
So that's actually a really good question. I'm actually planning to release a breaking change later this week or early next week, but it will be very easy to add a parameter that will undo the breaking change. So that change is going to be that right now it outputs HTML that's a table, and I want to change this to be nested divs instead. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a parameter that's like HTML format is that you can set it to equals table, and then it'll give you the table still. But I think it's a little bit easier to work with nested divs than to work with a table format. That's the only thing that I can foresee that would be a breaking change. But currently it's had about 1 patch a week since I released it. So I would say that it's still receiving a lot of updates. And probably for another 2 months or so, I would guess that it's going to be receiving a lot of updates, but I'm working very hard to make sure that it's going to be either no breaking changes at all, or if it does have breaking changes, then it's very easy to add a parameter so that you're avoiding having any changes like that. And when I say that I'm making a breaking change, the only thing that's going to break is CSS changes. So any parameters that you've added in wiki text will be totally stable. It's only that you might have to redo some styling.
Megan, thank you very much. That was great.
Just a comment that you can find it by just doing a web search on DRUID infoboxes.
Oh yeah, that should work too.
Awesome. Thank you. All right.
Thank you.